Shall we discuss this interesting story out of the Supreme Court? I think an encouraging ruling.
I love a victory.
Yes, it's a good victory on the legal front, and especially because it relates to something we've discussed before, and there's just so happens to be an article out at the Pillar about that Icelandic priest who spells his first name correctly, Father Jakob Roland, who was acquitted of this accusation that he was committing a hate crime or something and endorsing conversion therapy, which is this big scary term that people like to throw around regarding this, I guess, when you see these extreme examples of people trying to, beat the gay out of homosexual people and that sort of thing, these awful outlier stories. And that's not what the priest was endorsing by any means. And that is not what was up for debate in the Supreme Court, who they defended. And it was a big ruling. It was an 8-1 decision. So everyone except I believe it was the usual suspect, Justice Jackson, everyone else agreed that this was ridiculous, that
so everyone except for the person who said during the confirmation hearings, that she couldn't define what a woman was because she's not a biologist. So the way that she ruled on this was perhaps not particularly surprising. Mm-hmm. But yes, the other 8 people were still reasonable in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And, just to clarify this, basically all therapy has the potential to be called conversion therapy.
Essentially, yeah.
Because, reparative therapy, which is a branch of conversion therapy, calls itself that, aims to fix, deal with the traumas in a person's past, oftentimes childhood abuse, so that the person can heal. And in that healing, you'll often find that the attraction to the same sex simply goes away.
It's not a born this way situation. It often comes from this traumatic event or traumatic experiences. Not always, but often.
Right, and in this case, the specific one brought to the Supreme Court, in this case, you've got Kaylee Childs. And so she's there as a Christian counselor. And she says, okay, well, what happens if somebody comes to me and says, I have these attractions that I don't want? Can we work on them? Is there anything that we can maybe try to do? And the law in Colorado says that she, at that point, has to say, no, you simply are this way, and you should embrace it. Mm-hmm. Instead of attempting to work with the person. And so that's why she made the sort of First Amendment claim of, okay, well, I'm not even allowed to speak, to say what it is that I know, to focus on the experiences that I've had and the stories that I've heard. Because there's, an entire branch of psychology that has been sort of experimenting and learning this thing. And that isn't to say that everybody who has same-sex attraction can simply get rid of it through therapy. I'm not claiming that at all. But I will say that there are some people for whom it has worked, for whom have had success. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful when it has been, been the case.
Yeah, as the SCOTUS describes, these are people who are coming to her to say,
yes,
this is something that I struggle with because it's contrary to my Christian faith, that I believe this is disordered, and I want to try and deal with it in a healthy way that could also be something that deals with these other issues I have, these traumas I'm dealing with, these other problems I'm going through in my life. I want to try and deal with it in a healthy way that aligns with my Christian faith. So on any secular definition, if you're being objective, of First Amendment and the right to religious freedom, all of these things, this should be totally acceptable, and Colorado was trying to crack down on it.
Right, and if you think of it, I think that maybe there's a good parallel here that we can make. So imagine if a married man goes to therapy and he says, I'm wanting to, or having attractions to this other woman at work, and I would like to, I have these attractions that make me want to engage in an affair, but I don't want to have that affair. What do I do? Can you help me to not engage in this? And if you had the therapist who was like, well, nothing really wrong with adultery. That's just a Christian morality thing. Instead, you should just go for it and live your best life, right? That's what the Colorado law essentially aims to do with the same-sex attraction. Take a person who's struggling with an attraction that he doesn't want and say, no, you should go for it because that's who you really are.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. It defines a person by his attraction, in fact, by his sinful attraction, if you were to follow it, and says this is your entire identity. And there's something really cruel about that in a lot of different ways.
So it's encouraging to see the Supreme Court take a sensible stand. And it's encouraging to see these liberal justices on the Supreme Court side with the majority ruling on this and say, no, this is a clear case, legally speaking, of infringing on this lady's rights to practice this kind of therapy. This is not a matter of hatred. This is not a matter of trying to dominate your will over someone else. Even like this is not an attempt to enshrine Christianity in law as far as this goes. That's something we would like to see. But this is just from a purely secular level. If you're being objective, this ruling is absolutely correct.